Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, and two esteemed guests from a charity they're going to tell us all about today, helping out Ukraine. I welcome to all the live chatters up front. I will try and keep a handle on what people are saying in the live chat, but obviously it's going to be somewhat difficult with having to conduct a conversation as well. We're going to be hopefully doing some fundraising for them. We'll learn about the work they're doing and also talk about whether there's anyone in the Bristol area that fancies driving a van out to Ukraine, because that's something they also need help with. But we'll get onto that somewhat later. In the meantime, welcome Dan and welcome Gary. Thank you so much for popping by today.
Thank you for having us, Jonathan.
Very good to be here.
It's a pleasure.
Well, hopefully it will be a pleasure. We don't know yet. It could be absolutely horrific. So let's talk about obviously we're going to talk about what you guys are doing. We're going to talk about the charity that you guys are sort of working for. Let's have a look on the screen at the moment. Let's get that up. That is your Facebook page. It's called From Bristol with Love for Ukraine. Obviously a bit of a riff on the James Bond From Russia with Love film name, I'm sure, but it's kind of a bit of irony going on there. From Bristol with Love for Ukraine, not Russia. Too bad, Russia. This, we'll come on to say what you guys do, but I want to rewind first of all. And by the way, just in case anyone wants to know, you've just started out a new Just Giving page today, and that is in the description below. So if anyone's interested in that, that will be there. That is there already. But anyway, before we get onto that, let's learn about how you guys got interested in doing this. And then before that, let's try and work out what was it about the outbreak of the war that affected you. So, but before you do that, do you guys want to introduce your backgrounds and then we get a sense of who you are?
I'm Garry Frost. I'm an electromechanical engineer, freelance, which is quite handy because it gives me a bit more free time. Living in Bristol. I think I covered that, Dan.
Yeah, Gary and I have known each other for a long time. Our now adult children were best friends in infant school together a long time ago. Gary was the one that came across the charity first. It was, I think, late May or early June after the invasion when I got a WhatsApp from Gary, which is not unusual. They normally say, fancy the pub. This one said, fancy driving a van to Ukraine. Hell yeah, was the answer. Because, you're talking about motivations. Well, like most people, I'd been sat watching Denis Davidov and anything you could find that was around at the time, just trying to find out what was going on, absolutely fuming. It just seemed like an absolute outrage what had happened. Never been such a clear example of right and wrong in a conflict that I can remember in my living memory.
So this is what I wanted to just have a think about this, because when in my moments of self-reflection, I go like, why am I so interested in this? Okay, there's the war aspect, but I've never been particularly interested in any given war like this previously. But I guess I go back to my childhood and interested in war gaming and making models and all this kind of stuff. So I've got that kind of element of strategizing and actual interest in war and so on and so forth. But there was something about this that really was a case of unfairness. And for me, unfairness is something that really, really triggers me, like has always done. I hate unfairness.
Yeah.
And for the war, I think, like you say, this was something that was obvious, like who the good guys and the bad guys were. And I think that idea has actually continued throughout the war. Like from what we've seen, it's still obvious that is the case. Is that something that spoke to you?
Well, for me, there was a defining feature there are many wars in the world where you might choose to take a side, but it's not clear what you can do about it. And the difference with what made this so clear cut was there was a geographically defined boundary. There was a definite line, and the one group crossed that line, and it's very clear who the bad guys were and where they were. So that to me made it something that I could attach onto and say, I've got to do something here. You could have a problem in Syria or somewhere, but where are the boundaries, geographically speaking? And you don't know where to go to help or how to help. Whereas on this occasion, it just seems so clear cut.
So it's almost like here's a country, a sovereign nation that has been invaded. The borders have been invaded. It's very clear as to what's going on here, and therefore, like, it gives you a better sense of
Our nation had a responsibility that it's still, despite all what we're doing as a nation for Ukraine, and the same is true of America and I believe France as well. When Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, I was a student, but I remember, what went on. The world was terrified as the Soviet Union broke apart. They gave up their nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from the States, from us, I think France as well, and Russia.
Yeah.
And for us now to go, oh, here's a few javelins at the start of the war, and just not worry about tanks and worry about planes and all of that, I just found appalling, because I remembered that commitment, and I remembered how scared the world was of what could happen to these nuclear weapons. Because I don't know, I was a spotty student, I like watching the news and was into that kind of thing at quite a young age. So yeah, I was kind of outraged at how little was going on, but it was an easy thing to get involved with a humanitarian charity, because I'm not a warmonger or war-loving person, So going over there and getting a rifle and going to join the Foreign Legion was not going to be my thing. Be it a pacifist or a coward, I'm not quite sure which it is. But helping with driving a van with humanitarian supplies, yeah, let me at it. That's something I can definitely do and get on board with.
So did both of you really early doors think, I feel so strongly about this that I actually want to do something rather than just watch it on the news?
I had a bit of a soft start. The opportunity landed on my lap, and I just chose to take it. Now, I wasn't outwardly. I was enraged by the war, but that point is quite normal. To not believe that there's anything you can do that can make a difference. But it wasn't until I was introduced to the charity and then started to learn about it. I met the incredible character that is Razvan Constantinescu, who's quite a remarkable character. We happily talk about him shortly. But I initially got involved because my daughter was doing a D.V. and she had to volunteer somewhere. So
can I just, for the international audience, the D.V. is Duke of Edinburgh Award, which is something that you can do when you're kind of teenagers, and you get an award for doing sort of hikes and outdoor activity stuff, or also for helping charities, and it's kind of, I suppose, gives you a holistic experience of humanity and so on and so forth. So that's
the closest thing we have to national service, but it's voluntary
and shorter.
But quite a long way away from that. But yes.
So after having the introduction and talking to Razvan for half an hour, just couldn't help but be blown away by the way the charity was run, because there is nobody on the payroll with the charity. It is entirely run by volunteers. And it was talking to Razvan and said, how can I help? And he said, well, can you drive a van? Because we're desperately looking for drivers. So that was the introduction. And I went away not very sure, but trying to sound myself out. I run a bit of a curry club, of which there is probably, I don't know, a group of 18, 20 people on the list. And I sent a message out saying, would anybody be interested in driving to Ukraine? And I was totally blown back by not just Dan, but multiple people from that relatively small group of people that all within a very short period of time said, yes, let's go for it. And I thought, oh dear, I've sort of sown the seed now. I'm going to have to follow through with this. And just a lovely thing to get involved with. So it was a big moment, I think, for me.
So I'm guessing the story you're looking at there, which kind of predates even Garry's involvement, was the fact that Razvan and his wife Ileana were running a charity already. They're originally Romanian.
I was going to say they sound Romanian names to me.
Yeah, that's why if you see the sort of flag symbol up there or on our shirts, you've got the the Union Jack, and then you've got the Romanian flag and the Ukrainian one. And indeed, when we're delivering the supplies, we go right up to the Ukrainian border, but staying on the Romanian side. That certainly helps with the van hire, because they're not terribly keen on you taking hire vans into a war zone. It's a shame you get close to Ukraine. You could throw a stone and hit it if you take the northern route. Anyway, they were already running a charity in Bristol that was taking stuff to Romanian orphanages.
Right.
As you may be aware, during the Ceausescu regime, they were pretty ghastly places, and lots of them. So they were already running this. So when the war broke out, they knew that they had enough contacts over there to get stuff to where it was going to be needed and useful. And indeed, that's one of the great things about we just rock up and raise a bit of money and drive the vans. It's already sorted. We have no qualms at all that any money we raise is going to be used in a maximally effective way. So
that's really important.
Yeah, they've got trade unionists, medical staff, and military staff that work in the units at the other side of the border, working out where to get the aid and telling us what they want. So they'll be giving us shopping lists, either for us.
This was going to be one of my discussion points, which was what do you give, and how do you know what's wanted?
Well, do you want to talk generally?
Well, it's changed over the time we've been doing this. We've actually had satellite links set up before now,
Wow.
direct into Ukraine, talking to people and asking them questions, making suggestions about what we could possibly deliver, and would they be interested or would they not be interested. And there were times when it would chainsaws over winter. It was heated jackets that run off USB power banks, which we all had to try first, of course. They were very effective. Awesome. I did my shed roof with those. Then there was obviously sleeping bags,
generators.
Massive. We had a massive.
I think between the two of us, we've taken over 100 generators over there.
Wow! Obviously, I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, but we had like enormous support from the round table over here, and who else was doing that? The Lord. I'm going to get them confused. We've got so many mayors that have got involved and been helpful. There's
the Masons.
The Masons have been brilliant. They raised the most, I think. But then we have the Lord Mayor, the Lord Lieutenant, and what's the other mayor called? I'm so embarrassed. I can't remember.
those crazy, Mary types.
Really and wave us off as we're, heading off in the van. But they've run campaigns, and so people can buy a generator slightly overpriced, because then that covers for some of the transport and for the oil and adapters that are needed. And they get to load the generator onto the van and wave it off. And, 3 days later, see the pictures of it being unloaded. Another day or two later, see it arriving on the front line in a hospital, wherever it's at.
And that's really important to keep people updated, and being able to do that in real time. It gets that interaction with the donations that they've given. There you've got the impressive hat and necklace of one of those. Yeah. Yes, one of those Mary types.
She's great. She's
always good.
From Ireland originally, but I can't remember. I remember the speeches she gave. I just can't remember the titles.
Okay. So we kind of gone around in a few places here. So you got interested in wanting to do something. You guys got together. You had a curry club where you're like, we need drivers. I've heard about. I got this charity I know about. So at the beginning, what sort of things were you taking out before? Because there was this whole thing about charities at the beginning that were giving Ukraine a load of stuff that they didn't actually need, right? And that was ending up in Poland in these warehouses, and then just it's fairly useless. So was that something that you suffered from, or not?
Not because of the feedback, not so. But we very quickly realised that clothes weren't required, except for specific things like winter jackets. So we just listened to what they've wanted, and having that real time feedback has been really useful to make sure.
And who were you talking to? Like, what? Listening to who? Do you just like phone up Ukraine? It's like, can I just speak to someone? What do you want?
Yeah,
Razvan's very well connected, so yeah, it's
Razvan was. Let me get this right. Again, another title. Sorry, Razvan, if you're watching, the Consulate General for the Southwest of England for Romania. So he had contacts there. He also had people he knew in Galatz, was the first place we were going to, who then had relatives and colleagues over on the Ukrainian side, because obviously, you know, it's 9 kilometers from Renia. I think, yeah, well, you could take a look.
So this, the charity you're talking about, is that specifically for Reni? I mean, is this where you're all going?
That aid was generally going to Odessa. They were driving it through Moldova, who at the time had no camping gear regulations because they were terrified about, you know, Transnistria Russians kicking off. So they weren't anything that could be construed as military useful wasn't out. So all the camping stuff would get shoved at the back of the van, and we'd pile everything else in the front. This is when we're packing the Ukrainian vans.
There's a lot of medical aid that was
lots of first aid stuff,
sanitary, general cleaning products, all sorts. But
yeah, high value
food. Lot of food as well.
So, and this was where was this ending up going?
If you zoom in to the bottom of Moldova, or just head for Reni and you'll see it. We're just on the other side.
So this is on the Danube. Now we know about Reni, so it's not.
So it looks like Galati. It's pronounced Galatz, but if it's just on the other side of the border.
Yep, I'll find that in a second. So this is that's Reni's down here. So
it's further over. Yeah, that's Odessa.
Yeah. So the Reni is a place that's been hit recently by Russian
so that must be
Shahid drone attacks because it's on the Danube and there's a lot of
there, that's Galatz there. That's basically, we were dropping off in a sort of mini warehouse one time, the first time, and the second time in a kind of the equivalent of Costco, a large warehouse type supermarket, and we'd go to the car parks with their permission and load and unload the vans. I can't give the actual name of the company because obviously they'd rather be anonymous given what they're doing and how close they are to borders and things.
Yeah. So this was all happening sort of through Romania and then into this southern area of Ukraine. And did you know where the stuff went to when it was in Ukraine?
It went to Odessa and to warehouses there. That was the original, the first 2 trips. And then Razvan got new contacts and other places that were needed. And then we head up to the northern end, and we've done Suceava the last 2 times, or last 3 times, sorry.
But the actual aid has we've got a board back in the charity, the big map of Ukraine, and the pins are all over, so that the aid's been distributed wherever it's been needed. There was 2 occasions where they particularly wanted some specialist bits of medical equipment that were able to assist with operations. It could both cut flesh like a scalpel, but it was like done electrically, and fused back together. It was that one went to a maternity ward.
Hospital number 7 in Odessa. I remember just thinking, wow, that's such a Soviet name for a hospital.
It's funny, when I was doing some geolocation of was it a school that was it was a hospital that was hit somewhere. I was like, hospital number 14. I'm like,
yeah.
I guess you know where all these, you know, there is an organized feeling to this, but it's not like, oh, St. Jude's Hospital or whatever. So you get it's like hospital number 14 and then hospital number 15. But yeah.
But basically they have, as I say, a combination of trade unions, medics and military people that run the distribution center at their end. I don't think it's just us and our aid that they're delivering. I think we tend to get 1 or 2 deliveries a month on average. It's been tailing off a bit recently, war fatigue, all of that. Got to, trying to have another push, hence this kind of thing. The other thing that's difficult is winter deliveries. People much prefer going in the summer, which certainly our first 2 trips were amazing. because just it's beautiful country the whole way out, and the coffee gets better and better the further east you get, in my opinion. But we came back. We took maybe half a day to a day longer than we needed to coming back, because you can, right? You've delivered the aid. You've just got to get yourselves back now. So we went to Lake Balaton in Hungary on the way back, only for like 45 minutes, an hour. Had a picnic there. That was nice. And then the Grossglockner Pass, which was just awesome, which is over the highest route in Austria. And there you've got like Ferraris and classic motorbike clubs and us in our hire vans pumping up this beautiful road.
So Pierre Dupont here says, I was delivering a lot of generators, lightweight wood burners, Starlink systems, hand warmers and fuel last winter in the Donbass region. These items were in high demand. Yeah, I imagine you would have been delivering some similar things to that. I don't know, be as high tech as something like Starlink systems.
I think USB charging jackets was as high as or generators too.
Generators.
So we delivered or ran campaigns for whatever they gave. I mean, my aunt's fantastic. Her church group, they donate any unused medicines. I think if they lose a member of the flock or something, then, as long as the medicines are in date, those are generally well received. But yeah, specifically chainsaws and generators were what they were asking us for. Maybe in the Donbass, things are slightly different and they needed more wood burning stoves. Don't know.
Yeah, so generators is obviously particularly important near the front line, but also just in general due to the fact that consistent energy infrastructure, consistent energy provision to the population is such a challenge, given that the Russians are hammering or were hammering the energy infrastructure, and that is touted as something that's going to possibly happen again in the autumn, like pretty much now onwards. We don't know whether that will happen. The Russians, I don't know about the rationale for their distance strikes, to be honest. Like sometimes I don't want to give them advice on what they should do to try and do a better job of fighting against Ukraine. But sometimes I'm thinking, who's making your decisions? You've got a finite amount of long distance munitions and you're firing them at buildings to try and break the back. Didn't you know anything about the Blitz and how that doesn't seem to work? And therefore, if you'd spent this time hitting military targets, hey, you might have actually done a better job of really hammering the Ukrainians here. But no, you just wasted missiles on a lot of stuff. But that has meant that they need generators.
Their command favors loyalty over competence. You've said this yourself, Jonathan, I think, and it's a truism, and thank goodness.
Absolutely. I don't know if this is as a trade unionist member of the GMB. Could you ask how much help are the British trade unions providing? I did a thread a long time ago about it's not quite where it was some trade unions who with the railways and I think the railway engineers to do with the army and people who are formerly in the army now sort of working and whatnot, doing a massive amount of help to get the Ukrainian railways back on track. Hey, pun intended. During the initial phase of the war. So I know that there's some involvement there, but do you have any information on that?
I do not.
No.
Sorry. Good question.
Interesting. Yeah.
There's so many things that people can do rather than just consuming, the media and being interested. You can make an active difference by raising funds, getting, for either a local charity to you or, for ours. Great. It's not just from Bristol. You don't have to just, people can get a train down to Bristol and drive out. My mate from London did it. Old friend of mine used to study here. So I dropped him off in Egham on the way back and came over here. Hi, Jono, if you're watching. Yeah, absolutely. So you don't have to be from Bristol. It just so happened that the charity was called that. I don't think it was Bond related. We'll have to ask but it was From Bristol with Love, and that was when it was taking the stuff for Romania. So the For Ukraine got kind of stuck on when they started focusing on
that. That was one of the advantages, that the fact that the charity was already set up and was able to switch its allegiance as soon as the war started. I think before I got involved, I think the first aid reached its destination within a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
of the war started. They was quick off the mark. So.
Some people had their own vans, and that obviously made things a lot easier because they could obviously get into Ukraine, but the charity decided very early on that, you know, for their insurance and reasons, and we, you know, that's a warehouse that Bristol Council kind of gave us for a year. So for that kind of reason, they were very much, okay, we're not getting involved in the actual conflict. We're just delivering humanitarian aid to the border. And that just cuts through a whole load of paperwork and complications. But the point I was making, you don't just have to, you know, these are some options, raising funds or, you know, volunteer to become a driver. There's a link from our funding page, the Just Giving page, with a link with, if you want to get involved, you can register your interest and you'll get a sort of information pack with just the stuff we put together to help drivers. And Garry and I are here, part of our remit, being some of the more experienced drivers in the charity, the ones who've done more trips, is to talk to new drivers, people who are interested, and you know, kind of bring you on. So you're not just setting off with no idea of what's happening. You'll have a very clear idea. Yeah, we've got this huge Google document with, you know, here's what you want to do. You need to buy these passes for these motorways in these countries and all that kind of information. And we're on the end of the phone, you know, if you get stuck at the Hungarian border, hey, we've been there before. We know how this works. Give us a ring.
And if we're not on the end of the phone, we're down the pub. You're welcome to come along and we'll talk to you about it there.
Oh yeah, most meetings are held in pubs. That's very important.
Naturally. So you produce your own Bible to help these prospective drivers out. Talk to us a little bit about this challenge, and I think this is a challenge for all charities, but also in terms of just generally for support for Ukraine, which translates to political support. So there's this war fatigue that everyone was expecting would happen. News cycles are forever changing, and every kind of news item is fighting for competition, you know, of people's focus and attention. And so it's a real, I presume, a challenge for you guys to keep this going and to keep it in the limelight. How have you, I mean, here, it's not this one actually, I've got the wrong piece there, but where is there's an article. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so this is the one, the drop off in donations as media loses interest in Ukraine crisis, Bristol Aid Organisation says. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Writing to the press, trade unions and MPs is just as valid. That was the point I kept trying to make and getting sidetracked, to keep it, to make sure that the people who can do the most are aware that we all still care. I spent a few days on Telegram on channels with mainly Russians, just trying to, you know, put reasoned arguments across to people. And I very quickly realized, look, you are just, this is not a constructive use of your time. You will, you know, you are not persuading anyone. They want to believe that they do believe. And in some cases, they're being paid to say they believe. just that's not a good use of your time. But writing to people, press, trade unions and your MP, is a good use of your time, because as you say, the press only want to do it if there's a new angle. And a really good time for us was the anniversary of the war. They got interested, and then very, very close to that was Christmas, Ukrainian Christmas being different to ours, and they're just one last little go at Christmas. But of course that's changing now, because they're aligning the Ukrainian Orthodox Church aligning with the Western Christmas calendar. So we won't get that extra little excuse for the media. But yeah, we got, you know, local TV coverage at that time on BBC and ITV. So, but they want an angle. It's got to be something new, because it's news. Same old, same old. They don't have no interest.
So, so is this something that you've seen translate into donations going down, into you know, struggling to get drivers now, as opposed to, you know, asking a year ago?
I think we've made it more of a personal appeal now. So we will literally go out and talk to a relatively small group of people in a church and see if we can get people interested. And we've got a driver at the moment who's looking to go out at the end of this month. In fact, we've got looking to have 2 vans go out at the end of this month. So, and we've got enough aid already, and we've got all the drivers necessary. And that was through just going to talk to people in a church. So, I mean, any opportunity for Dan and myself to come in, if you want us to come to, you know, if someone listening has got a big company and they want us to come and do a talk in front of 10 people, 1,000 people, whatever, we would grab the opportunity, because I think if you can talk to people personally and explain that nothing's changed, it's still going on, and let them know how transparent this charity is. That's the best way we can make a difference at the moment.
Thank you hugely to Andy and Julie McFadden, who have added to that, and now it's up to 160. So that's really awesome. Kind of those two. They're legendary, of course. Sorry, you were going to say something, Dan?
I should shout out to my company, Turn It In, because they raised 500 quid. When I mentioned that we were doing this, and they give me a couple of days off a year to do charity work. So I should definitely say thanks to my company for letting us do that and raising the funds. I was supposed to go up there and give a talk. Their head office is in Newcastle, obviously a bit away from Bristol, but it coincided with trip number 2 or 3. I can't remember now. So I was actually driving over to Ukraine and just sent them sort of video links to play at their summer party.
So this is something you were saying, there was a challenge for transporters, as you say, drivers going to Ukraine or to Romania. And do all of the drivers go to Romania? Do any of you go to Poland or?
Well, some of the drivers have gone off on other trips. Like Dave had just come back, what, a month or 2 before, and he'd been over in Ukraine. So yeah, but not
as in with another charity.
Yeah.
Right.
If you
okay.
own your own van, it's up to you what you do with it. But the charity aid and the activity and the support of the charity ends in Romania. They're very clear about that, and I think that's for legitimate administrative purposes.
But you can take the route you like.
So
some people go through Slovakia and some people through Hungary. So you choose your own route.
Yeah, and you were saying that actually it's quite challenging to get drivers, because not everyone's got. So it takes a week to do that kind of trip, to go there, to come back, and not everyone's got that kind of time off. If you say you've done it once or twice in a year, then that's half your holiday gone, and that's quite demanding therefore, and not everyone can be away from kids and things. So it is. I imagine it's quite a challenge.
You need 6 days to do it as a job. So that's 14 hours on traveling, 12 hours on the road, 2 hours stopping, switching drivers, filling up the van, having lunch, whatever. So basically that's 2-3 hour shifts per day. That's fine, right?
It's not physically challenging.
That's not really that demanding, and you can just book your hotels on the way. You've got a mobile phone and a USB cable to charge it in the van. You're laughing. You're just, it's 4 p.m. We should find. I reckon we can get there. Let's look on Booking.com and find somewhere. It's not a challenge. The challenge is clearing. Being away for a week with your family. So our kids are of a certain age that it's viable for us. Thanks, wives. So the other part is, especially on the first trip, you need to raise the funds. Now, I'm lucky. I had a large family who were really generous. I was already running a kind of big family party, so I had 100 of them coming, and I was like, "Hey, cap out Ukraine trip coming up," and they were fantastic. Garry also, it was easy for us the first time to raise the funds because we knew enough people that a few hundreds, a few 20s here and there, and 2 people in a van, you've got enough for the sort of 2,500 roughly. It was taking then. I'm thinking it's probably going to be closer to 3 these days, given prices going up and everything. But any money that gets left over, you choose as your transporting team what to do with it. Either just put it into the general charity kitty, which most people do, and they'll then buy stuff directly on the border. So rather than take the physical aid all that way and spend all the money transporting it, it's more effective to buy the aid on the border. But the thing is, people like giving the physical aid. We talked about loading a generator onto the van. You see it, you feel it. Same with collecting outside of supermarkets. It's much easier to get someone to go in and buy a few bars of chocolate than it is to get a fiver out of them because everyone's after money. This is something real, right? Oh, I can imagine
Interesting.
someone eating this or.
But one of the big things is for me is also, as Razvan always points out, it's not just the physical aid itself, it's the label on the outside of the box, and people in Ukraine knowing it's come from the UK, and that people outside of their country are spurring them on and believing in them. And they will. We know, we're not in isolation. I can imagine countries across Europe and elsewhere that are all sending aid into Ukraine, and every time they see another label from another location that's backing them up, it's got to give them some energy.
That's such a good point, Garry, because I was listening. I think it was to a Ukraine, the latest podcast episode from the Telegraph that was talking exactly about this. That actually there is something that Ukrainians love to know that people have their backs, and that actually people are still caring about them outside of the country, because I can imagine they might at times feel really isolated in terms of this is us against the Russians, and they are here and no one else is here helping us, like physically here, but we know we're getting military aid. But do people still care? Do people still feel like this is unfair? Because we feel like it's unfair, obviously, and that feeling that there are people out there still working for them, and seeing these trucks, these vans turn up with aid, I can imagine it's hugely.
Yeah, sorry, breaking up a little bit there, but yes, caught the sentiment. Yeah, I mean, the sort of the strap line of the charity, I think Razvan came up with this, and it's just a brilliant phrase. Humanity will prevail. And that's what we're working towards. The right thing, good people doing good work. That will win over the evil that is so obvious with the Russian invasion. Humanity will prevail.
Have you built up any relationships with any Ukrainians at all? Was this all done through?
Yeah, I mean, you meet them in the car park, and a few of them exchange details. Razvan prefers to manage those contacts rather than have a whole broad network. It's easier if the communications with the Ukrainian side funnel through him, because they'll ask you for stuff directly and all this kind of stuff, and he prefers to manage that. But yeah, you meet them in the car park, you go for a coffee with them afterwards, have a chat, find out kids, sometimes exchange details, and then tell Razvan, here's the guy we met, he's got these.
You get the flags out, take some pictures, and it's good for both sides.
And what a feeling.
They're very aware also that they've been through talking to Razvan's explained how important it is for us to get feedback, because that when we do get pictures and images, then obviously people can see what's happened to the aid that they've given, and that feedback is crucial. It's not that you want thanks, but you want that confirmation that what you sent out got to where it was going to go.
Because as well, I mean, there's all the challenges, of course, with anywhere in the world there's corruption. We know that there are issues with corruption in Ukraine as well, and this is an ongoing challenge for Zelensky, and people will always try and take advantage of the goodwill of others. So being able to show that what we have done with your money is do this, take it to here, giving it to them, and this is what they have asked for, and tick 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 tick. So I assume
on your sort of WhatsApp stuff, as you're driving back, you'll be getting pings as the stuff arrives at the Ukrainian center and it being unloaded there, and them saying, we presume, thank you very much, in Ukrainian. I'm not sure how to make Google Translate run on a posted video from WhatsApp. Some people do translate the stuff later when it gets posted on the charity things. But yeah, you'll see stuff arriving there. And then, as I say, usually a day or two later, you start getting the bits and pieces as it arrives elsewhere, as it's being distributed. They don't hang on to it long. Certainly those generators were flying out and being shown. I think it's great that they've got this sort of tripartite thing of the medics, the trade unions, and the military. And you kind of, and plus you meet the people, You hear their stories. This stuff's getting to where it's needed. It's not just disappearing along the way, and that's what's nice about it being people to people and not.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was kind of going with that. Yeah.
Day one, I wanted to go and give money to Ukraine straight away. That that awful day when they'd invaded, and I froze up in the end because I didn't know who to trust or what to do. And when Garry said these people are real, come and meet them, it was such a relief to just know that what you were doing, the efforts you were making, were definitely going to the people you wanted them to go to.
And I think that made the difference when I was fundraising. I put the word out on Facebook, and when people knew that I was going to physically take the goods myself to the border, that instantly they had that confidence that it wasn't going to be 90% shifted off somewhere else and 10% getting the way to the front.
Oh, there's Razvan in the middle.
I mean, the inefficiency, of course, is the expense of getting a van to the front. It is a lot of aid that we get in there, and we know that it's not as efficient as buying aid on the front line. But that, as I said before, that's knowing that one of the biggest things that you're carrying is the message, and those boxes, they're all labeled nicely with handwriting, and they'll all be sent out. That's what makes it worth it.
Just pointing out the dates on that are rubbish, but to correct them, I had to pay for it. It was a free personal blog. So those dates are absolute nonsense.
So yeah, so you've done lots of. How many transporters, or how many trips has the charity been responsible for?
Oh, geez,
we should have got these facts and figures before. I think they're around 70 by now, but
I'm pretty sure it's just over 70 vans have gone out.
Wow, that's amazing.
There's a good tonnage.
Yeah. Each van is 1.5 tons worth of aid. The insurance company's listening. Each van is 1.3 tons worth of aid. And any month where we weren't able to take any month we weren't able to actually make a delivery, they've managed to buy £4,000 worth of baked beans or whatever it is on the border. So we haven't missed a month in terms of delivering aid.
Yeah, which is astonishing. And so, well done everyone who supports this, because I pop in occasionally on the weekends. I'm doing the sporty children thing like you do, Jonathan, a lot of the time. So it's easier for me to take a whole week off and just do that. So the people who go and collect the aid and pack every day, the charity has got so many different people fulfilling different roles that are just as crucial.
Pierre Dupont here says it's heartwarming to see and hear a couple of normal lads doing extraordinary things for Ukraine. There is a lot of appreciation and love for the British people in Ukraine for this help. Fantastic. And, these guys are the silent heroes. I mean, there are so many people who do such wonderful things. You guys, I'm not belittling what you're doing in any way. I'm trying to big it up, but there are a lot of charities just doing phenomenally amazing work. And it's it is testament to the fact that there are good people out there. Do you know what I mean? That this is as horrible as this whole thing is. It's an opportunity for other people to shine. And here you guys are, and your charity doing exactly that. And it's great. Thank you so much, Peeps, Simon Hines and Mark Bisque. Really, really generous of you, pushing that total up for the Just Giving page. So thanks so much to you guys. So what do you? How do you feel? I mean, we're going to go slightly off piste here, I guess, with regard to the charity stuff just now. How closely? I know, Dan, that you do. I don't know, Garry, you follow what's going on in Ukraine amazingly closely. How do you feel? And even if you don't, maybe what do you get from mainstream media about how you think the war is going? How positive you are that Ukraine will prevail? Give me your thoughts on these kind of topics.
I listen probably twice a week to I think it's Ukraine Today or something. I think it's
the latest one, either the Telegraph.
The
or
Telegraph one, I
One.
think it is.
Ukraine, the latest. Yeah.
So I know you really, all of us, I think, have a responsibility to get our news from multiple sources. So I ought to look elsewhere as well. And following Dan's recommendation, I shall be listening to your channel as well.
Oh, thank you, Garry.
It kind of feels pointless recommending it to everyone watching it already, right? You already found it. I only stumbled across Jonathan, ATP Geopolitics like 2.5 months ago, and made my first bought him a coffee. What, 3-4 weeks ago? You were on holiday, weren't you? I was just like, I can't believe your family's letting you do this. You're a say that's how this thing came about. Yeah, but I will probably do somewhere between an hour and 2 hours of YouTube stuff a day, lunchtime, sometimes just as radio on while I'm working, depending on what I'm working on, and less so on the mainstream media, because you've already kind of seen the stories if you're staying on top of the situation that much on YouTube. But I do.
Yeah, I mean, I've found it that mainstream media seem to want to be contrarian, because it's about, like, if they give more of the same, then it's not going to attract the readers. But if they put out something like, "Oh, it's not going very well, is it, for the Ukrainians? Oh, they're in trouble now. They don't get it done by Christmas, it's game over." Then people are going to go, "Ooh," and then they'll share that. And unfortunately, that is the way that we kind of consume news more readily, right? And so that's why they do it. But it means there's possibly a distortion of what's really going on, and how. I mean, my personal opinions are that Russia can't prevail. I wrote an article, as I keep telling my viewers, I wrote an article back in April last year saying, well, Putin can't win now. I mean, it was as soon as he worked out that he couldn't take Kiev, right? He's like, well, now what's he going to do? And he didn't have a plan B, because it was all on the kind of depose the government within like 2 weeks, and that wasn't going to happen. They're like, oh, we're buggered now. So then their special military operation actually became a war, and there was a war they couldn't win. They can't occupy that country with that many troops. So that,
I mean, it seems like he's doing this because he's got nowhere to turn. He's got no way out, right? I mean, if he just withdrew like we all want him to, like he should do, like a decent human being would, I wouldn't have gone in the first place. He's history. He's taste. He's retired in the Russian way.
Well, and like somewhere.
And that's it. And because he's got no option, the only option therefore he has that isn't political suicide is tenuously hanging on and hoping that something will come about, which is people getting sick and tired of it, and then people stopping giving assistance to Ukraine, and then Russia can step in and say, okay, now we'll do diplomacy and we'll help ourselves to Crimea and Donbass. But there's just no way they can win, and it's just But I was just wondering whether you guys felt that. Are you still positive about the outlook for Ukraine?
These people are dying to defend their country. It's hard to be positive, even if Ukraine win, the devastation that's been done to that country and the help they will need to get back off their knees is just enormous. Do I think Ukraine will come out of this better than Russia? Yeah, I hope so. I mean, reparations from Russia. What's going to happen in the negotiations? I'm not a geopolitical expert, so your opinion is probably worth more than mine, Jonathan. In fact, I know it is. I just want Russia to withdraw. It's not going to end up like that, is it? There's going to be some negotiated settlement where they keep some bit of Crimea or Donbass, maybe hand back Luhansk and Crimea, and keep the eastern half of Donbass. I hope not. It's not the right thing. But Realpolitik will take over at some point, and I hope it will include that Ukraine have membership of NATO, because they need proper security guarantees, not like the stuff we gave them last time, and frankly reneged on, or just
it's the difference between security assurances and security guarantees, and that's why the security guarantee is much more sort of formalized framework, which would put boots on the ground.
No missiles, there are no nuclear missiles is a fine concession to Russia, I guess, if you're actually, as I say, doing realpolitik. That'd be okay, but it's not for me. It's for Ukraine. It's their country. It's their situation, and it's for them to decide what they want to do, and it's our duty to support them. They're defending Western European values. They're defending Western Europe. We committed to defend them, whatever they want. That's our job. Not really advise them on what to do with their country.
That's a really good point. So right at the beginning of the war, I wrote an article about who was responsible for this whole war. And as I was trying to look at both sides and say, is there NATO encroachment? The kind of Russian talking point. Is NATO responsible? Are the US responsible in, Senator McCain being over in Ukraine at the time, and Nuland and all these people, and Euromaidan and blah, blah, blah. And I was saying the whole lens with which people are looking and have looked at the Ukraine war so often is a lens like through other nations and how they see Ukraine rather than how Ukraine sees itself. So it's like, it's the US's fault or it's NATO's fault because of this, or it's Russia's fault because of this. And rather than saying, well, Ukraine, what do you think about this? Like, NATO were encroaching. Well, Ukraine, did you want to be a part of NATO? And if you wanted to be part of NATO, then, in the same way that Poland rushed, post Warsaw Pact, rushed to NATO, it's like, well, if Ukraine want to do that, and that's their wish, and that's their democratic prerogative to do so. So let's stop seeing Ukraine as a political football being used by Russia and the US, or Russia and the West, and let's see them as their own sovereign entity that get to tell us, what they want to be. Sorry, that's my rant over.
No, quite right. I mean, when I had this few days on Telegram, just arguing with Russia, not arguing, debating, trying to take their points like, it was never given away in the first place. And then, I found myself looking up Russian constitutional documents and, debunking stuff. The EU's got a really good, fact check stuff on all these propaganda stories that the Russians will tell you it's your fault, it's NATO encroachment. And some things were said during the Clinton era. I'm trying to remember the Secretary of State at the time. I can't remember his name now off the top of my head, but he talked about the possibility there'd be no further encroachment east when this was what's going to happen with East Germany and German unification.
So this is the Minsk agreement. Was this around the Minsk agreement? No, this isn't the Minsk agreement. This is the Budapest Memorandum at the time. But this is Gorbachev. Now, that's a really interesting point, because this is a bit of a myth. So apparently that was never actually said, and Gorbachev himself has said that was never said.
But it is in some notes from the meeting. So I think it was made as a sort of James Baker. I think that was the guy. So it's possible that some things were said, and the Russians will pounce on anything like that. It was never formally agreed, and George Bush had also said, no, hang on, we're the ones that prevailed here. We're not giving away guarantees like that. So it was mentioned and discussed, I believe. It's hard to tell, right? You're looking at documents from way back then, but it was never a formal agreement. And as you say, Gorbachev said, no, that didn't happen. That wasn't agreed. They were so desperate at the time to get the funds, and the Russians always conveniently rewrite history to forget the times that America have bailed them out when they've been in absolute desperate need, because they do not want the state to collapse, despite what the state keeps telling its people in Russia. Second World War, they wouldn't have survived the German
Lend-Lease
that came over and so on. So the Russian people are just lied to by their state constantly. It's so obvious. I've read the links and looked at some of the videos I gave up after a while that they were sending me on Telegram about the crimes in the Donbass and the bombing. There's no doubt there's wrong on both sides. That before this conflict started, there's no doubt that Ukraine has some Nazis. So does any old football club in this country. You know, they're everywhere. They're in Russia. Come on, the guy with Wagner and the tattoos. There's more Russian Nazis that I see in my media feeds than any other country.
So one of the best debunkings of this kind of like Ukro-Nazis myth is that actually when you look at the far-right political representation in Ukraine, it's far less than the rest of Europe. It's like literally like they are politically the least Nazi country in Europe. Like, or one of the
far-right parties got the lowest share of the vote. It was somewhere between 2 and 4%. I forget now, but I've looked at a lot of the election data trying to establish these Russian claims. And what you find is that, you know, hey, Russia wins when they've taken over the territory and are running the elections. If you go back to the last election before any invasion, in every single territory, the majority was that they wanted to remain Ukrainian. Even Crimea, which was the closest at 52% in.
Yeah.
Going to struggle with the year now for that election. But 2010s. Late
yes,
2010s.
Yeah, it was maybe 2012, but or something. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And Crimea was the lowest, but it was still, you know, still majority wanted to remain part of Ukraine.
You know, I've watched the John Mannheimer. I've done the Oliver Stone film, and I accept, you know, maybe there was some CIA meddling around the time of you know, the whole Maidan Square. Maybe it wouldn't surprise me, right? Every country is trying to push things their way. But where's the greater sin?
So, but the question, so with regard to this, and sorry, Gary, this is like going off on one here, but the question, what gets me about that conversation is that to say, oh, there is some CIA meddling or US meddling or EU meddling or whatever in Euromaidan is to forget that the reason there was that meddling is precisely because there was Russian meddling already. And it's like the Russians sent their own bleeding soldiers in, and like the little green men. So it's like, if you're going to talk, don't overemphasize the influence of the West and the US in the absence of saying, well, actually, this was kind of a reaction to the fact that Russia were meddling, and it's that kind of meddling that is far more. I mean, it's both kind of nefarious, maybe, but I think it was far more nefarious what the Russians have done. Like, and it's demonstrably the case that they have done that, and now Russia have come out, you know, 2014. You know, the little green men illegal war. You know, Putin's come out and basically accepted that now. So it's like you've got no leg to stand on.
Yeah, agreed. Just a question of the right and wrong of this war. I just, any objective observer, it just seems so transparently obvious.
Yes. Just to go back completely back to the charity work. Here we have Wendy House just tuning in. I live in Bristol and can volunteer. How do I get in contact? I'm sure that's something you would love to read.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes. There's website links down below somewhere.
All the links should be below
with his high-tech stuff. And one of them is a link to a Just Giving page, but there's some information on that page, and one of those is a link about would you like to get involved, and it'll take you to a little form you can fill in. And there was also a comment earlier saying Southern United States, tell the Ukrainians that they're in their hearts too. Sure, my company's based in Dallas. I know lots of people from South America. They're all very Southern American states that are really supportive. So I clocked that, but I was too busy talking. Sorry.
Absolutely awesome from Keith Thompson and AJ Simo. Awesome. Thank you for continuing for supporting these guys and the work they do. Really, really generous. And that link will obviously be at the bottom of this video for, you know, in perpetuity. So what other things can you tell us about your experiences that you've had maybe on the road in what you've come across and the people that have been helping out? That might be interesting for us to know about.
You don't have to have a partner to start with. The very first time I met Razvan was going to a garden party at their house that they were sort of letting the old transporters meet the new ones. There was no formal system back then. And there were a couple of guys there that had met on the morning they drove off together, and they're now firm friends for life. I think that's quite brave, spending 6 hours, 12 hours or 14 hours in the cab together with someone you've never met before. I've done it with old friends, and it's just been awesome. just
You've got to
fun.
enjoy the conversation, because it's an awful lot of motorway driving. Let's be honest.
Or podcasts.
A podcast, yeah.
And
Other entertainment is available, but
tunes.
you head on down there, and you see a massive amount of motorways. We tend to avoid France because that way we cut the tolls down.
Yeah.
But when you get over into Romania, it's very different driving. It's all single track roads, and it's beautiful countryside. And then you hit the mountains, and you're over the mountains, the Carpathians.
We drove past a bear in the Carpathian Mountains.
Yeah, he looked a bit stunned. We don't know if we've been hit.
We've
but
been
yeah,
up
there was,
snowy tracks where the vans couldn't get any higher, and we had to get out to get up to the mountain lodge that we'd arranged to stay at that night. It's an experience, right? It's an adventure, and you can do great good at the time. And the night after you've delivered the aid, when you've got back, part of the way, you're usually sort of around the sort of Romanian-Hungarian border at that point, one side or the other. Half a bottle of red wine as you're sitting back with your mates, just go, look what we've just done. We've just delivered X, number of generators and this much food and this much. You're looking at the sort of manifest that you've got as you take the stuff over. What a feeling. Come on, get involved.
There's something to be said for, in philosophy, there's this idea of mattering, like that you matter, right? And the meaning that gives you. And yes, this shouldn't be about you, but if you feel like you are contributing to humanity, as you say, it's this project for the betterment of humanity, and you feel that you've done your part in that, then that I can imagine that being an absolutely gratifying feeling. For all those involved, and going all that way and doing that, saying, that you've got permission to pat yourself on the back and say, yeah, good job.
Yes. Well, all the philosophical stuff and arguments about motivations and all that kind of stuff. You've done the right thing, and it feels good. Simple.
So the Pierre Dupont, who Pierre, let me know, are you in Ukraine? But Pierre Dupont says, for example, I've never seen a Red Cross vehicle in the Donbass. The group that I work with created 2 humanitarian centers in Bakhmut, and it was all supplied and funded by small grassroots groups. That's it's something interesting. There's something interesting in there about how the smaller groups are perhaps able to go into places in ways that larger groups are unable to. Is that something you know anything about?
Yeah, well, the one chap that drove with myself last time, Dave, smashing guy, he actually drove through Ukraine, and he kept because Vodafone in Ukraine have given free not Wi-Fi, data coverage right across Ukraine. And so he actually just left his dash cam on all the time he drove through Ukraine. So that was good to see. But he was linked with a group that actually had permission to go in, and they were predominantly supplying pet food. So that was their angle, and they were seen to be fairly non-offensive. They were allowed to go in. On the back of that, they took an awful lot of other aid with them. But what they did was they stayed in the Ukraine for what was it, 3 weeks?
Yeah,
I think it was about 3 weeks. And once they delivered the initial load of aid, they then bumped into people that were providing. I think it was Red Cross had a lot of water purification units, and they just redistributed them wherever they found they were needed. And then they were blocking up, helping people block their windows up where they'd been smashed in and things like that. So they did all sorts on the way around, but they were able to get access. One of the limitations for us, I think, is probably keeping the paperwork simple and not. We would find it hard to get insurance.
Yeah, so it's always frustrating when real bureaucracy and real life gets in the way of wanting to do good, right?
Yeah.
But at the end, the flip side to that is, but when you need that insurance, you're going to need it, type thing. So
Yeah, I mean, it's simple, right? We can go to a hire company and hire the van, and they'll tell you can't take it into, Serbia, you can't take it into Ukraine, and okay, well, that gives us quite a few possibilities
Some of
of
them
getting
won't.
to the Romanian border.
Some of them won't let you into Romania.
Yeah.
So it's just whatever however quirky the insurance company is for whatever reasons. I'm sure it's all statistically driven.
Julie McFadden, who has donated, thank you so much, Julie. Donated
Thank you
money
very much.
does not really relieve a sense of helplessness like I imagine what you're doing does, which I lived within driving distance. I could imagine, the actual tangible doing of it has a really great impact.
Thanks.
Just donated to Bristol Boys Charity via the Just Giving link. Well done, gents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? Sorry, I kind of interrupted you when you were talking before. Is there anything else you were going to talk about your experiences of doing what you've been doing, about who you've met, about talk to us a little bit about maybe as well the Romanian chap that's doing this and what his motivations might be?
Razvan, well, where do we start? He's quite a character.
He's a legend.
A very principled gentleman. So everything's got to be just so. He keeps a very tight ship. But he's just instantly admired by anybody who meets him, admired and inspired by. So, and it's very, very much a two-person team. He and his wife Ilana, they just work seamlessly together. And Ilana just has to give him a little sideways glance, and he'll stop whatever he's doing. So, whilst we always get the impression that Razvan's in control, it only takes a raised eyebrow from Ilana, and the course could just instantly change. It's remarkable.
They both have skills that work so well together. Razvan's an incredible communicator and motivator of people and team builder, gets things going, and Ilana's organized and thorough and does the work quietly in the background. They work so well together. The team they built, the aid they've got, and the help they've got from people in the Bristol community has been inspirational. I mean, this charity would not have happened without them, and it's done so much good. Yes, it's a whole team of people doing it, but that kernel, that getting things started, is harder than you think. It's more special. It's rarer than it should be, and that's why I'd encourage people that are interested, even if they're outside of Bristol but wanted to drive. You can always, get down here to set off. It's only a train trip. Or a bus trip. You saw photos earlier of Jono. That was Jono getting on the train in Victoria.
But anyone that knows me, that's not me, because I'm often known as Jono. So did I? Oh, brilliant!
I've been to Ukraine with 4 times now, 3 times with Johnny and once with Jono. So
right, and I'm known as both. So
we'll turn next.
Can I just say another big thanks to Andy Smith and Adrian Warhayes here, who have donated as well. Really, really impressive. Thank you. Moving that up to £300. So that's really great for your generosity, guys.
We're aiming to go January, February time at the moment, just because that's the sort of the most difficult time. So it seems fair for the more experienced transporters to take that on. Plus it's kind of gorgeous in the snow at the top of the mountains, but there is a slight risk you can get cut off and have to wait for the snows to clear before you travel. So far so good on
plus that. We're into next year's holiday allocation then as
well.
So
can't go before January. I did January and February this year. That's like used up straight away. But yeah, spending time with your friends, on an adventure, doing good. It's not like we're not angels. We're doing the right thing was made easy for us, okay? And I'm trying to make it easy for other people. If you want to get involved, as I say, go to the Just Giving thing. You don't have to donate, but you can. That's great. But there's a little link on there where you can just get involved. If you're in the Bristol area, brilliant. You can volunteer to, go and collect outside supermarkets or whatever.
Because the other thing,
or you can drive.
We haven't mentioned the other ways that you can help. I mean, some people would come along and make the tea, literally. Some people come along and they're packing boxes, because everything we sent out is packed ourselves. If anything is brought in a box, it's repacked, so we know it's packed properly, so it's not going to collapse. And we also know we can vouch for what's in it. but there are other people that are doing fundraising. One person was actually tending the grounds on the last place, because we actually tried to keep the place, because we were lent it by the council. We wanted to keep it in good nick. Unfortunately, we've moved out of that place now. The new place we're in is much smaller.
Pierre Dupont says, I asked him whether he's in Ukraine. He said, no, I'm heading back to Kramatorsk within the next couple of weeks. I haven't booked a flight yet. If the Bristol boys need a driver in that time frame, I don't know. You guys hook up.
Really?
Let me know. I'm not quite sure what that offer is, but it sounds pretty cool. I have a Bristol anecdote in that my goodness, I haven't spanned my books for months and months, but I've written, I'm in the middle of writing a series of fiction books, post-apocalyptic fiction, and these are set in the West Country and Bristol as well. There are some characters that come down from Bristol to go to Devon, and there's some.
Oh, if you come to Bristol, you never leave, Jonathan. It's the graveyard of ambition.
Well, if you go to Bristol in these books, no, you don't ever leave, because you get killed. But you know that's something.
Spoiler alert!
It's friendlier than that.
Unless there's a pandemic that ravages through and turns you mental. Anyway, you can check out my Survival of the Fittest books if you want a good late summer read now that summer's over. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So before we sort of start wrapping things up, you said that you're planning on going out next year. Is that for, do you know what you're going to take out already? Do you have the things stacked and ready to go?
No, not that far out. We've got a smaller warehouse than we used to have. The one you've seen in those photos, Bristol Council needed that back to rent it out.
They can only really fit in enough aid for 2 vans. So at the moment, we would love to have a bigger premises again. It was much easier when we did. The parking's good where we are, but it's really quite small. But we have to be grateful, because we're not paying for it. We have to be grateful for what we've got.
Is that Tonne or Tone? I'm not sure how you.
Tonne Otterson, I would have thought. Tonne.
On the Just Giving page, I don't know if you could bring that up, Jonathan. I'll try and link you at the link. I'm pretty sure I put it there. If you scroll down, there's 3 links. Right, stop there, but scroll up a bit. See this? You've got trip 1, trip 2, and then it says, and here's the charities webpage, and then you've got thanks for caring. If you want to get involved and do something similar, click here. Now that should take you to a little information form I've put together, where you just sort of tick what you're interested in. And if you tick on the transporting thing, there we go. So it's really simple. You give us your email, you tell us what you're interested in, and then we should get back to you.
Cool. So that's one to do. Go onto that Just Giving page and follow that link. And I'm sure you can maybe
what you want to do, and we'll send you something relevant rather than, hey, I think I can collect in supermarkets. Hey, here's all the stuff about driving to Ukraine.
It goes straight through to Dan, so we'll get it directly.
And my brilliant email inbox, which is really well organized.
The UK car driving license is depending on your age. We tend to find that the rental companies won't rent to anybody. I don't know how old you are. Won't rent to anybody below the age of 25. And over a certain age, you've got what they call grandfather's rights, where you are allowed to drive up to, I believe, a 7.5 tonner.
But
I've got one of those licenses, but I don't think they give them anymore.
No, so I don't know when that stopped. So it all depends on how old you are.
If you register your interest, we'll figure it out whether it's doable or not. They're 3.5 ton vans basically, and that includes the weight of the van and the aid, hence it being 1.3 tons, 1.5 of aid. And we figured out that's the most economic way of doing it. A 7.5 tonner would make sense if there's one driver being paid for their time. If there's 2 people that do shifts and aren't being paid for their time because we're volunteering, then it's actually better to do the 3.5 tons, because Gary's really clever at figuring stuff like that out.
We can do some maths, but 44, right? I'll look into that.
Yeah, good stuff.
Sounds good. I reckon you'll be okay.
Well, brilliant. Fantastic. Well, look, are there any final thoughts you want to give? I don't know if I'm going to be breaking up. My internet's just suddenly gone a bit nuts there. But is there anything final that you want to say to those viewing, or any topic you want to talk about just in general?
It's not over. Keep pressure on.
It's what I tell every time I see them in the car park and handing the aid over. Just tell them we will keep doing this as long as you need it. And we've all, keep your interest up. Thanks for being interested in Ukraine, everyone that's watching. Clearly you are, right? You're on this channel. And you can do some good. If you've just been watching because you're interested, think about what you can do, even if it's just writing to your MP saying, hey, we should be giving more, we could be doing this, or your trade union or anything. That is activity. I know it feels little, right? But if more people do this, the more they can, it becomes pressure on these people, and they start to realize their constituents or their trade union members care. Put them on the back foot, make them work. That's what they're there for, to represent you. You care about Ukraine, let them know. And if you can get involved in a local charity, I would encourage that rather than the bigger ones. But, whatever you're doing, I'm sure. And it doesn't have to be Ukraine, does it? Just do something positive. We see people coming past the supermarket going, well, what about the local food bank? I'm like, yeah, that's important too.
Yeah.
There are so many good causes out there. This is one that we happen to care about and happen to get involved with. But,
it's just that good and evil. It goes back to that real visceral kind of, this is deeply unfair. And especially when you subsequently see Ukraine and the nation of Ukraine being a nation with dignity and integrity. Yes, it has issues like any other nation will have, but there is something about Ukraine that is positive, with an eye on their future, what they want to be, this positive idea of what they want to be. And you look to Russia and you think, you are the antithesis of that. You are the restriction of freedom. You are the restriction of self-determination there. And how could I begin to sympathize with the Russian project here? It's just like, it seems so morally obvious to me that like, I almost get indignant that anyone could even begin to support Russia in
you take the trolls down is just sheer pleasure.
But if I were to talk to anyone that was Russian, I'd want to say, how can you be so sure of yourself when the second the war kicked off, your independent news agencies were shut down, and you only now have one source of news? How can you be so sure that you're not being lied to? And that doesn't apply to the rest of us. We have so many sources of news. That's how I can be sure that what we think is right.
And our internet isn't controlled in the way it is in Russia. They have to get VPNs if they want to get a different.
When I was talking with the guys on Telegram and these Russian channels, they were like, "Oh, you're such a, you're a GCHQ plant." I just refused to believe it. I was just like, I'm really not. They're like, "Oh, that photo's fake." I was like, "Do you want me to take another photo?" I was like, and my username is my first name, my middle name, and my surname. I'm just like, man, I'm just the person arguing, debating with you. But then, you realize you're probably just talking to trolls that are being paid to push their narrative. It's so hard to tell that, I decided that wasn't a good constructive use of time very quickly.
I'm going to do a segment. I'm going to do probably a whole video on an extra on trolls again, because A, there are lots of them hanging around at my place, and B, it is so important, and it's so important going forward into the future. If we want to protect our own democratic institutions, then actually we need to be looking out as to what Russia are doing and how they're doing it. And we need to put things in place really seriously. And we need to be aware individually ourselves as members of a free democratic nation that actually we can have our own ideas insidiously infected by narratives that are being spread by these troll factories. Yeah. And as I said the other day, I'm just finishing a book by Rachel Maddow called Blowout, which is to do with the oil industry. But then it's actually largely to do with Putin and Russia. And it's a fascinating book, and her chapters on the troll factories that we talked about previously on my podcast, which is the Internet Research Agency started by Prigozhin. He said, we've been meddling in the US elections, we are meddling in the US elections, and we will meddle in the US elections. Now, he's dead. That's been closed down possibly, but it won't be. It'll be just a change of employment.
You saw your trolls disappeared for a few days and then they were back again. So someone went, yeah, we'll pick up your salary check. And
and she's talking about how they are managed with, like, you've got to do this many posts a day, you've got to have this kind of engagement, you've got to, it's a job that, like any other job, and they have and they have targets they've got to meet, and it's just. But those targets are affecting, like, how much they can affect our information space and our ability to be a part of a free democratic nation.
Yeah, a bit like an X algorithm.
Yes. Anyway,
sure. Yeah.
can I just say thanks so much to Kathy Riss for supporting the channel? I really appreciate that, Kathy Riss. It does enable me to keep doing what I'm doing, which is sharing my obsession with you, so that stuff like this stays in the public consciousness. And speaking of which, the
wow,
donations have gone up to £402. So thank you so much to Matthew Bishop. So Saberint, those who know, I interviewed Matt Bishop. He's in Australia. He was living in Kharkiv with his Ukrainian wife, and then had to leave there. So go and check that live stream out. Thanks, Matt. He's a legend. And Haymaker as well. Amazing, generous donation there from Haymaker. So,
yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to say sort of final words for you guys, because I've done way too much talking. So, and I'm going to do one more bit of talking. Garry, this is my Garry anecdote. So one of my mates from uni, on one of the sports teams I played for from uni, and he was like, I was like, Garry with 2 R's. Why have you got 2 R's in your name? Garry's spelt with 1 R. And he was like, well, it turns out that my dad thought that if my name is spelt with 1 R, like, normal Garry's, then actually it's too similar to Mary, and he didn't want me to be called Mary. So we're like, thanks for telling us that. Your name is now Mary, and so his nickname was like Mary for the next few years, just because his dad wanted him not to be confused with Mary by spelling it with 1 R. Anyway, sorry, that's my Garry anecdote. Last words to you guys.
I'd have gone positive on that and gone, I want to be like Harry and Larry. But I wouldn't have mentioned Mary, definitely not. No. And I'd like to say thank you for keeping the word out there and giving us the opportunity to talk. It's fantastic. And thank you to everyone else for listening.
Yeah, you're doing your bit, Jonathan, for sure. As I said when I first bought you that virtual coffee, I said you'd keep the interest going. So I'm so motivated to go back again. So that, it's all part of it, and you're doing a wonderful job. Keep it up, mate. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks more importantly to you guys and the work you do, which makes a real tangible difference to people's lives, I'm sure, in Ukraine, and getting those generators to people who can use them and be able to have power in light of, or in darkness of what the Russians have done. Is super important. So thank you guys, and thank you so much to all the people who have or not to him, he's a bit of I think a bit of a troll there, but thanks to all the people who have been supporting today. Really appreciate that. Thanks to you two. You're welcome back on at any point going forward in the future, when you've maybe done in the new year, you've done your next sort of travel there, transportation. Are either of you planning on going on that, or is that someone else?
No, the next trip is being run by some a mix of old and new drivers, I believe.
So do you go? I said this is the end of the questions, but I've got just one more. So do you go in convoy? How many vans go at once then? Is it just the 2, like you said?
1 or 2 generally, usually 1, but we've done quite a few double trips. Certainly Garry and I have been out together 3 times and never in the same van.
Yeah. It's not that we don't like each other.
It's because we're social, so we can drop into any old van.
Yeah, and it's been a mixture of co-drivers as well with us. So
plus it'd be a shame to break up a friendship that's been so long, spending too much time together. Who knows?
We're probably going to the pub now, aren't we?
I hope so.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, just have a post podcast chat and a pint. Yeah. Just raise your glass to me, because I'd love to be there with you guys shooting the breeze. Anyway, thank you again. Really appreciate your time and your efforts. Thank you to everyone else. Stay on the line. Don't go, boys, because we'll have a chat in the green room. But in the meantime, everyone, take care, and I'll speak to you in my usual pieces tomorrow. All the best. To the bits.
Cheers all.
Take care.